It just wasn't explained well, and I just feel like the author spent so much time writing about Big Titty Liddy that she didn't even develop her magic system.
Let that wave crash over my head and pull me deeper. Let the water fill my lungs, make me stay forever.
Alright, hey guys, it's Jocelyn. Welcome back to my channel, Jocelyn Reads, and today I'm going to be doing a April wrap-up. This is also my Owls Magical Readathon wrap-up, and I did complete all my owls. I completed my owls to be a mind medic, and then I also completed my owls to be an attorney for Magical Beast or something like that. I don't remember what each of these books aligned with for each prompt, but if you watch my April TBR, it will tell you there. But I am now, am I a mind medic? I don't think I am a mind medic yet. I think I have to wait to take my newts or something. But I am on my way to be a mind medic as well as an attorney, so like the baddest bitch out here, period. I'll be doing this wrap up a little bit differently just because I read 22 books this month. I don't know how it happened. I feel like I had to pick between 3 things, and it was reading, doing schoolwork, and filming, and I could only do 2 of those things consistently, and I chose reading and doing my schoolwork because what the fuck was I gonna film if I couldn't read? So I think it makes sense. Hopefully you think it makes sense, but I am here and I'm hoping to be consistent for a while now. So for this wrap up, I am only going to include 11 books. I'm going to do a separate wrap up for my new adult books because I read so many new adult books a month that they can just be their own separate wrap up, and if I include them in the same wrap up, I always never get to really expand on my thoughts for the new adult books because I usually have more thoughts on my YA fantasy or adult sci-fi fantasy, so I usually end up like cutting what I want to say about my new adult. I'm just gonna have a separate wrap up for my new adult, and hopefully I can be able to expand on my thoughts on those books when I'm talking about them there. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of stats. If I'm looking down, I have a notebook where I kind of prepared myself for this wrap up because I felt like it was just going to be a lot because I read a lot. So I read 22 books, 11 new adult that I'm going to talk about in another wrap up, 4 YA fantasy, 1 YA historical fiction, 2 YA contemporaries, 2 adult sci-fi / fantasy, and 1 YA horror / thriller. And I had 1 1-star rating. I did not rate 5 books, and they were all new adult books. Usually when I read like erotica, it's hard for me to give them a rating because where was the plot? And I had 3 2-star ratings, 5 3-star ratings, 5 4-star ratings, and 3 5-star ratings, and that's just my rounded rating. And also I read around 7.3k pages, so there's that. Oh, and also I'm going to start doing my wrap-ups by genre just because I think I like talking about them in the categories of genre because I feel like it flows better when I'm thinking. So I'm going to start doing my wrap-ups like that instead of going by star rating, and I'll also put timestamps below from when I talk about each genre in case you want to skip around. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is my middle grade book, and it was also a graphic novel. As I said, it was Lumberjanes by a whole bunch of authors. I honestly forgot all their names, but I did not give this book a rating just because it was not what I was expecting. I actually didn't know that it was middle grade going into it, but once I started, I quickly discovered that it was middle grade because of how childish it was. And I honestly do not read middle grade because I can't relate to it, and I always need to be able to connect to my characters to really love a story. So this book follows a group of young girls, and they're at a camp, and while they are at camp, they continue to run into all these supernatural beings and supernatural incidents, and they're basically just trying to figure out what is going on. And that's pretty much the whole plot. It wasn't very cohesive, and there were a lot of like convenient plot devices that were used to get them to the next step in solving their mystery, but no one is surprised because it's middle grade. Like, it's not going to be complex. And I found a lot of the dialogue cringy, but also, like I said, it's not for my age group. But yeah, the dialogue really reminded me of Teen Titans Go. You know how you had the original Teen Titans and it was just everything, and it was so powerful and we all loved it, and it was complex and we had complex characters, and then they went and made Teen Titans Go, and it was just like Beast Boy singing in that car a rap song for like no reason. It was just all cringy, and it was just clearly not for us OG Teen Titans fans. That's what Lumberjanes felt like, that same type of cringy feel. That was Lumberjanes for me, but I feel like for anyone else who enjoys middle grade, maybe it would be for them. So the next category that I'm going to go into is YA historical fiction, and the book that I read in that category was only 1, and it was Lovely War, and I ended up giving that 5 stars. It was phenomenal. It was nothing like how I explained it in my TBR, so I'm sorry if I got you interested in that book based off what I said in my TBR, but what it resulted in being was actually just as interesting as what I thought it would have been when I described it in my TBR, if that makes sense. So this book essentially is 3 love stories, and it starts with Aphrodite and Ares being caught in the middle of an affair by Aphrodite's husband. I do not know how to pronounce his name, so I'm just going to call him Aphrodite's husband because that's how women are referred to, so why don't we do it with men? And in the theatrics of gods, they have to be put on trial for this adulterous, is adulterous a word? For behaving adulterously? Come on, Jocelyn. No, for taking part in adultery. I think that for sure is how you would phrase that. To defend herself, Aphrodite ends up telling us 2 different love stories that take place during war times, and she brings in a lot of different gods in order to be their witness and tell about the love story from their perspective. And the way in which the stories are told, they are 2 love stories. I thought it was going to be like kind of like anthologies, but it's really cool because Aphrodite actually intertwines the stories and is told from her point of view and the god's point of view, so you're never reading directly from the characters that are falling in love's point of view. And I actually really enjoy that aspect of the book because it made it feel Disney-esque. That's the only way I can describe it, but you're kind of looking outside into the characters just like you would when you were watching a movie. And I especially like that this was coming from the god's point of view because it took away any feelings of me feeling like it was insta love, because you do start off in the midst of the first love story and you start off with them immediately kind of falling in love. And if it was any other book, if it was from their perspectives, it would 100% be insta love and I would 100% not enjoy watching that relationship develop. But because it's coming from Aphrodite's point of view, you get to see her kind of scheming and conniving and doing little outside things that make them feel the way they feel about each other, and it doesn't feel as much like insta love, and it made me really enjoy the book. This book tackled so many important topics and they did it in a way that was also so enjoyable. There were sad moments, there were happy moments, and all of it together just was just a really enjoyable book, and I definitely would recommend it. Alright, so the next genre that I have is YA horror thriller, and I only read one of those this month, and it was House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin Craig, and this fulfilled the prompt of something like reading a story set by the sea. And I ended up giving this book 2.75 stars. I'm really disappointed because I thought I would really like it, but I should have known I wouldn't because I don't really like I've never been drawn to stories set by the sea, and every story that I read set by the sea, I end up rating it lowly. This book is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, and I've actually never seen 12 Dancing Princesses, so I'm just gonna give you guys a bit of the synopsis. I don't even know which parts of these were like taken from the 12 Dancing Princesses, except for the fact that there were 12 princesses and there was kind of this plot about them dancing, obviously. So the story follows 12 sister princesses who are dying. Like, it starts off with a couple of them already being dead, and then they continue to die off as the story goes on, and there's these supernatural aspects that are being taken, like creepy, like footsteps that they don't know where they came from, or footprints that they don't know where they came from, and just like the tub, someone grabbing someone in the tub and things like that. They're supposed to be really creepy and freak you out. And for me personally, all of these scary supernatural aspects were really mediocre. Like, nothing actually really scared me or made me feel creepy, so that whole aspect of the book was just flat for me because I wasn't scared, nothing was creepy. So though I liked the atmosphere, it was nothing like breathtaking for me that would make me be like, oh, this is 4 stars alone just because of the atmosphere. It was just kind of there. And like I said, the prose was nice, but because I wasn't invested in the story, for me it didn't matter that the prose was nice because I didn't really care about what was going on. So the next genre that I'm going to get into is YA contemporary, and I read 2 of these, and the first one that I want to talk about is Sadie by Courtney Summers. Sorry about that, it's my ring light. I think I'm just gonna put up a picture instead. Before I talk about this book, I just want to say there is a trigger warning for topics of sexual assault and conversation around sexual assault and the aftermath of sexual assault. So if any of that is triggering to you, I definitely would avoid this book and maybe skip past. I'll put a timestamp of when I am done talking about this book in case it is in any way triggering to you. So this book begins with a podcast, and the podcast is describing the way in which a girl named Maddie went missing and then eventually was found dead. And then we get this kind of quick flip to Sadie's point of view. This book kind of goes in between the podcast elements and Sadie's point of view. So we get this quick flip into Sadie's point of view, who is Maddie's sister, and Sadie starts off the story immediately by saying she has a knife and she is going to kill a man. And we presume that that man that she is going to kill is the man who killed her sister, Maddie. And from there, we just follow Sadie's journey to killing a man. And I love that this book starts off with saying that Sadie is going to kill a man, and we follow Sadie trying to kill a man, not Sadie changing to figure out that maybe killing is not what she needs to be doing or things like that, or her finding a way to forgive what was done to her sister. It's Sadie being angry and Sadie taking out that anger, and that was so refreshing to read. But first, when I listened to the audiobook, I know a lot of people talk about the audiobook, and I personally found the audiobook to be amazing as well. But when I first started it, I did not like the audiobook just because there are a lot of different voice actors, because this is a full cast. So the first voice actors that I were introduced to weren't the best acting wise. Like, it just felt fake to me. So I was like, I'm not gonna like this audiobook. But when we flipped into Sadie's point of view, Sadie's emotions were so raw and genuine. Whoever voiced Sadie on that audiobook did an amazing job. Like, I could feel Sadie's rage, I could feel her anger, and I was right there with her, angry too. So the audiobook, I feel like, is perfect just in that way to connect to Sadie as a character, because you're listening to her voice. She's like telling you what happened basically. It's not a second person point of view, but it's like hearing her voice is like her telling you what happened, and it just makes you feel that much more connected to the story, that much more invested in her killing this man that she set out to kill, and it's just amazing. So the next YA contemporary book that I read was Call It What You Want by Bridget Kimmerer, and this completed the prompt of having a heart on the cover for owls, and this one was actually really good. It was a lot better than I expected, which I shouldn't have underestimated Bridget Kimmerer. She's probably my favorite YA contemporary for older YA contemporary readers. Her plots and her characters follow very mature topics, so it's a way for me to stay into the genre of YA contemporary while also not feeling like I'm reading about someone that I can't relate to. For this book, there's also a trigger warning for suicide and talk of suicide, and also a very graphic mention of how one committed suicide. So if you cannot handle that, I don't know if I would skip past that scene, but it's a very prevalent topic in the book, so I don't know if I would just avoid the book altogether, but that's your decision to make. I just wanted you guys to be aware. This book follows the story of Megan and Rob, and both Megan and Rob have had some serious issues in their life, and they are now trying to get through them. Rob's dad attempted suicide after he was caught embezzling money from the company and like all the little people in their small town, and so Rob is dealing with the aftermath of that, as after his dad attempted to commit suicide, he is now left in this kind of vegetative state where he is there but he's not really there. So Rob is dealing with that and kind of figuring out who his father really was and why his father did the things he did, and if there's more behind the story than what Rob knows. And Megan's sister has just come home from college and she is pregnant, and she is dealing with the repercussions of not necessarily teen pregnancy, because I'm pretty sure she's a freshman. She might be 19 or 20, somewhere around there, but just being a young pregnant woman who was in college and had to deal with her life from there, and it's kind of tearing Meg's family a bit apart. So they're both going through a tough time, and they're paired together for this calculus project, and they kind of find comfort in each other, and they tell each other about the things that they've been through, and they kind of fall in love through there. And it's actually really good, especially because they had these very raw experiences that made them get close to one another rather than just thinking that the other one was cute. They had these deep conversations about things that they were going through, and you just watch the relationship develop into something more, and it was just so genuine and I loved it. Now the calculus project that brought them together, they worked on that a total of 2 times. I know they failed the project, but they fell in love, and I enjoyed watching them fall in love, and it was great. I read 4 YA fantasies this month, most of which were disappointments. That first disappointment was The Storm Crow by Kaylin Josephine. It's so sad that this is a disappointment because this cover, absolutely stunning. Like, no one can say this isn't stunning. And underneath the dust jacket, oh, even the map, like this is the most stunning book, but the insides really don't match. I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. This book is a very typical YA fantasy. We follow a princess named Anthea. I listened to the audiobook and I still don't know how to pronounce this bitch's name. Her name is Anthea, I'm pretty sure. And we follow her story after an enemy kingdom invades her kingdom and basically kills off her mother and just destroys the kingdom as a whole, including these crows, which is essential to her society because they provide the kingdom with power as they give them kind of elemental magic. The crows have elemental magic, so in controlling the crows, they also control the elements and things like that. So after all the crows are destroyed and her kingdom is destroyed, she's left in this kind of depressive state, and her sister is left to take over the kingdom, and the kingdom has lost most of its power because without the crows, they don't have any power. And in order to kind of get some power back, her sister has to marry Anthea off to the prince of the enemy kingdom that invaded theirs. And this plot sounds no different than pretty much any other YA fantasy that you've read that's hate to love and fake marriage. Like, it's literally the same plot. And the thing about that is I feel like it doesn't matter that it's the exact same plot, it's just the way that it was carried out. There was nothing unique about it. The characters themselves were very bland, nothing stood out. And for me, that's why it was a 2.5, because you can have the same plot because there's no story out here with a completely unique plot. It's what you do with it and adding your own unique elements to it that kind of elevates the story. And I feel like that was the downfall here. Nothing was elevated. Now this next book, what the fuck was this? What was it? This book is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Maharan. I'm pretty sure I'm saying her last name wrong, so I'm sorry about that. This to me was some type of Sarah J Maas fanfic where you were given everything bad that Sarah J Maas does with none of the redeeming qualities that make me love Sarah J Maas's books, even though a lot of people hate them. So this book follows a witch named Lou who is basically forced to marry a witch hunter named Reed after some type of an unfortunate situation, stupid unfortunate situation, makes them have to get married. Basically, it just made no sense, and it was just so stupid, and they literally couldn't come up with any other reason to get married other than that. It's just like, what was that? But anyway, after they get married, I keep going off on tangents just because I'm just like, what did I read? But after they get married, we have to follow the battle between the church, which Reed is a part of because he's a witch hunter, and the coven, which obviously Lou is a part of because she's a witch, and we follow the battle of the witch and the coven through these two people as characters, and it's just not done well. As you can see, this plot is pretty much the exact same thing as the Stormcrow, but this got less stars than the Stormcrow, just because even though the Stormcrow was average, there was nothing that stuck out that was terrible about it. So I gave it a 2.5. But this one was average, and then it was just fucking cringy, honestly. So we got the cringy dialogue between characters, we got the jokes that are beaten to death. Yeah, Big Titty Liddy, that was overdone. Just like, I don't know why Big Titty Liddy was this song that Lou sang because she was a feminist, and she thought that she wanted to be inappropriate in order to kind of break gender roles. But to me, singing Big Titty Liddy is just not an accurate representation of feminism, and I'm sorry, but that's not the peak of feminism, Lou. And also, she was just a fake badass main character. Like, she was supposed to be this feminist because she defied gender roles and things like that, but she also contributed to girl hate, one being against sex workers and one being against this girl that she didn't even know. It was just Reed's ex-wife, and she just called her a cow in her head for no reason. And I was just like, but you're a feminist, so why are you doing that? But okay, but you sing Big Titty Liddy, so you're a feminist, but okay. And the main characters just share a single brain cell, and Lou, with her fake feminist self, she has like 75% of the brain cell, and then Reed has 25% because he can't even think for himself. He's a grown-ass man who is stuck behind these bigoted ideals from the church because he got saved when he was an orphan. Like, yeah, you were saved as an orphan, but also you can't even think for yourself. I'm so tired of these grown-ass men not being able to think for themselves. Like, what is going on? And also, Reed is just Matthias as a witch hunter, and we all know no one fucking likes Matthias. So I didn't like Reed. Usually the main character, the love interest in the Sarah J Maas book, can really get me. Like, Reese really got me. He was an asshole in some parts, but then you figured out why he did that and kind of got me. But Reed is just a bigot, and he's just a witch hunter Matthias, and no one fucking likes a racist, bigoted person. So he wasn't a redeeming love interest. I didn't want them to be together. I just wanted him to be alone, and I wanted him to burn on the stake. And it just doesn't make sense for a badass character, a badass feminist character like Lou, to fall for someone like Reed, because I understand hate to love and where that goes, but to me, there's just a line, and there's a good way to do hate to love, where you don't want the issue to be too small, but you also don't want it to be too big to where you watch a person kill someone else of your kind and you still fall in love with them. Like, it doesn't make sense, especially to be this big badass feminist character who was supposed to be breaking gender roles, and then you're with this fucking misogynistic person and you think that you're changing him by singing Big Titty Liddy. Like, what? When it came down to the wire and we really needed Lou to be that badass that she never was. So was she actually a badass? To me, she was not. Along with the plot conveniences, it just didn't make sense. Like, even the magic itself, like, Lou is a witch and she can see these threads and pull them, and they kind of hurt people. They're threads connected to people and they pull them. I still can't even explain it well, and I read this physically. It's not like I just dozed off while reading the audiobook. It just wasn't explained well, and I just feel like the author spent so much time writing about Big Titty Liddy that she didn't even develop her magic system. Alright, so the next YA fantasy that I read was actually an urban fantasy, and it was a YA classic, and it was City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. This is a library copy, so that's why it looks like this. I would think that everyone knows what the Mortal Instruments is about. I've already read this book before. This was a reread. The last time I read this book was maybe when I was like in middle school or high school, and I'm now a sophomore in college, so it's been a bit of a while since I last read this series. And from all the things that people talk about on booktube, I thought that this was just going to be the most cringy thing, the worst written thing, and it's actually not. It's actually pretty decently written, and there were some very outdated jokes in here that were just like actually offensive to read now, but it held up pretty well to the standards that I had for it. It was definitely way above the expectations that I had, and it was fine. I actually liked Clary and Jace individually as characters. I liked watching Clary and Jace's friends get together and kind of just the whole friend group becoming a thing. That was really nice to see, actually, and the banter between them was pretty nice too. So this book actually held up, and it wasn't as bad as what I thought it would be, and yeah, it's pretty decent. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was fine. Now, City of Ashes, on the other hand, which I also read this month, and I gave 2 stars, which it might even be 1 star, but I guess I'm just being nice. This is trash. This is what I expected the City of Bones to be. So this book is literally just uncomfortable to read as a YA fantasy. Like, the incest side plotline and the way that it is talked about so much for a book written for like teen readers, and it wasn't a taboo new adult romance for the way that this book was so heavily focused on incest. Those books you go into kind of expecting that taboo element, but imagine picking up a YA fantasy book and then having to read about incest. Like, it's actually just disrespectful. Like, and I also just felt like Simon was a very manipulative character. and his behavior, he just did a lot of things for attention from Clary, and it was old and it was tired, and I was just like, grow up a bit. I mean, I know he's 16 years old actually. I'm not gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. We all know that Clary, like, I'm pretty sure it's just very obvious. Everyone knows that Clary didn't like Simon. Simon knew that Clary didn't like Simon, but he continued just to be annoying about it, and I just felt like they both had a toxic relationship with each other. Like, Clary knew she didn't like Simon, but she also led Simon on, but Simon could have taken that prerogative and been like, I know she doesn't like me, and moved on. But they both just wanted to be in this toxic relationship, and I didn't like that aspect of the book. Clary's mom was also in a coma throughout this entire book, and Clary maybe thought about her 2 times because she was so busy thinking about wanting to date her brother. And I'm just like, do you not care about your mom anymore? Like, it's just, to me, that's the thing. It's just so many different things that were going on, except there was not one cohesive plot in my eyes. I just feel like there were a lot of different things happening just to happen so the book would be longer. Like, the book could have been 200 pages shorter just because there were too many side plots going on and there was too much focus on this incest plot line. The one cohesive plot in this book was the fact that Valentine was a villain and they were trying to chase the Valentine. But to me, Valentine is not even an interesting villain. Like, to me, the villain in the Infernal Devices, which had no plot whatsoever, like this series has more plot than Infernal Devices, but the villain in the Infernal Devices had a more interesting backstory and more interesting reasons for being a villain than Valentine did. Valentine is just a bigot, and it's just like, we've seen it all throughout history. We've been seeing these bigots, and it's just not interesting to me. So like, he was just a bigot just to be a bigot, and I didn't care for him. Going along with conflict as well, the same conflict with the Clave is always an issue in every single book that I've read. Okay, I've only read the Infernal Devices and the Mortal Instruments, but I'm pretty sure there'll be a problem with the Clave and the Dark Artifices as well. And it's just like, can I get a little bit something new with that? Like, there's always this side conflict with the Clave not believing all the people at the Institute, and that's also just a bit tired. So now I'm on to my very last category, which is adult sci-fi / fantasy. And the first book that I have for that category is The Library Unwritten by AJ Hackwood. And this book is kind of a conundrum for me. It was better and worse than what I expected it to be, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So I gave this book 4 stars, and this book follows a librarian named Claire who is in charge of keeping track of all the characters in this library in hell. She's in charge of keeping them both in their books and in hell. So if they escape from their books, they at least have to stay in hell. But this book starts off with one of the characters getting out of his book and out of hell, and Claire has to basically chase him down and bring him back to hell. But in doing so, she runs into a whole bunch of different problems, and it becomes way more complex than just returning a character to their book. So this was actually the first book that I've read where I enjoyed the plot more than I enjoyed the character. We didn't actually spend a lot of time in hell, which I thought we would. That's the part that I was really interested in. I was really interested in the library. But we did spend a lot of time talking about the politics of hell in the library and things like that. And it was just so well done. Everything was so clearly well thought out and well connected. Like, every single time they went to a place, like, you know, on Shadowhunters, they go to a place and they go there just to go there, so they take up some time and so the book can be longer. Every single place that they went to in this book, they did it in order to do something else. Like, it was all connected in a way, and that made it really intriguing because everything had a purpose, and I was trying to connect everything as I went. And though I didn't feel particularly connected to any of these characters to the point where I would like die for them or anything like that, the character development and the relationship development between the different characters, not even romantic, but literally like friendships and just the relationship dynamic between characters, it was really genuine watching their friendships develop, and they were also very well paced. Like, it wasn't just like they went through one difficult thing together and then they were best friends and they all really cared for each other. They went through these grueling experiences together and had these very dynamic and very complex relationships with each other. Even though the characters weren't the best to me, everything else was just top tier, honestly, and I would recommend it. The last book that I read this month was Middle Game by Shauna Maguire, and it was absolutely my favorite book of the month, the most well-written book that I read this month. Obviously, I gave it 5 stars, and this book, I might be looking down at my notes while I explain this book, and it's just because the plot of this book is so complicated and kind of convoluted, but in the best way possible, because it's all done like kind of like Library of the Unwritten. It's all done with a purpose, and nothing is there just to be there, and you literally see it all kind of connected as you read. So I'm gonna look down a bit to explain it, just so I can explain it the best way that I know how, because of how convoluted it is. So this book follows the story of the twins Roger and Dodger. Roger is a boy and Dodger is a girl, and they were essentially made in a lab by this alchemist named, I'm pretty sure Reed, but I might have that wrong. And they were injected with this thing called a doctrine, which is an entity that contains all the knowledge from language and all the knowledge from math. So anything that can be compared to language and anything that can be compared to math and science, all of that knowledge is encompassed in this thing called the doctrine, and they are injected with it. 2 other pairs of twins are injected with it, and then all the twins are sent out into the world and to opposite sides of the world from the other twins, and they're basically just meant to grow up, and they are meant to see if they kind of get their respective parts of the doctrine, because the doctrine is going to split into language and math, and each twin is going to be a prodigy in that subject, and they're trying to see which set of the twins ends up the strongest so they can use them to kind of take over the world in a way with all of the knowledge that they have from the doctrine that was kind of injected into them. So we watch Dodger and Roger grow up to be these prodigies within their respective subjects. So Roger is language and Dodger is math, which I like to see because I like to see the female in STEM representation. We always love to see that. So Roger is language and Dodger is math, and they live on these opposite sides of the country, and they're not supposed to be in contact with each other, so the doctrine can basically develop without them being too dependent on one another, or else the experiment basically won't work. So as they grow up as their respective prodigies, and you watch it from when they're young all the way to them being in their 30s as adults, and as they grow up you watch how the doctrine that is separated between the two kind of reach out for the other. It's so complicated, but it's done so well. Okay, so my favorite part about Middle Game is that you watch the characters grow into themselves literally. Like you start them being maybe 6 or 7 or 8, and then you watch them go into their 30s. You watch them develop these character traits that they have. And I actually haven't read a book where I grow with the characters like that. Like I read them growing from 6 to 30 years old, and it's actually really beneficial as a reader because it makes the characters so much more realistic, because you see how they get the character traits that they do, and you just experience every single thing with them, and it just makes you feel so connected to them. So it made me really like these characters. These are some of my favorite characters because I literally feel like I grew up with them. And the one thing that I can say about this progression is the fact that I kind of wanted to see more, even though I was given a lot. It's just the fact that sometimes we got these time jumps where they went from 6 to maybe like 17, and then they're kind of a different person when they're 17, and then you're like, I kind of wanted to watch them progressively reach that state. Like I saw the events that happened to make them get there, but I wanted to progressively watch a person change. And there are also kind of 2 sorts of scenes that you got within this book. There's a lot of time jumping and things like that, but I was able to understand it, and I know a lot of other people who said they were able to understand after a while. It might be kind of confusing at first, but it really is easier to get into as you keep reading. So there are different timelines within that, so like Roger and them switching between being 6 to 17 and back to 6 and things like that, where it can be confusing. And then you also have this timeline where you're reading from Roger and Dodger's point of view, and then there's also reading from the alchemist that made them point of view. And to me, Roger and Dodger's point of views were way more interesting than the alchemist's point of view, and I think that was just because they were more mundane and they were more easier to understand. Whereas with the alchemist's point of view, I was confused as to what exactly was going on. Like I couldn't necessarily understand the magic system at first and what he was doing with this doctrine and how Roger and Dodger played into that. Obviously I had to understand it more as the plot went on, but that made his point of views less interesting. For that all to be in there, the writing was very accessible. I could understand everything that was going on, that was literally happening. There was some vocab that I didn't understand, but it was later explained, which was kind of the purpose. And the writing was also immersive in the way that it goes along the same lines as growing up with them. It was immersive because you could feel their emotions, and that kind of had to do with you growing up with them and the way that it was written. I could literally feel the pain when they felt pain. I could feel the longing every time they were separated or the doctrines wanted to meet. I wanted them to meet too. But yeah, those were all the books that I read outside of the new adult books that I read this month. I didn't get as many 5-star reads as I would have wanted, but that's fine because we always have next month. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and all those things down below, and I'll see you guys in my next video.